museum is very excited to welcome Professor Andrea Thomaz from Georgia Tech, who is a human-robot interaction expert, and she's going to talk about her research and human-robot interactions and some particular robots that she's developed with her group, including Simon. So thank you so much, Professor Thomaz, for coming.
Thank you. Well, thank you all for coming. It's really exciting to be here to tell you about some of the stuff that we're doing at Georgia Tech. So I have a research group called the Socially Intelligent Machines Lab, and here they are. So I'm going to tell you about some of the stuff that we're working on, but to set that up, we work on robots, and there are a lot of robots that you can think about that are out in the world doing a lot of things for us, but usually they're doing things like going up into space or building cars for us. And the thing that makes these robots work is that they are in structured environments where we can plan ahead what's going to happen. And so, unlike that, my group is interested in working on social robots, where people are going to be involved in the interactions that we want these robots to have. And so people make it a really hard problem because they come in and they do all kinds of things that we can't predict. And so we need to build robots that have a social understanding of the world. So that's the main problem that we're working on. And one of the things that we're interested in when you start to think about being able to go to Best Buy and buy your robot and bring it home, one of the problems that we want to work on is, well, okay, now that robot's at your house and the designer of that robot has never seen your house, so how are you going to get that robot to do what you want it to do in your house? So that's our main problem that we're thinking about, is robots that can learn from the end user. So this robot, we bring it home and you want to just tell it, okay, here's how I want you to do my dishes, or here's how I want you to do my laundry, or here's how I want you to clean up my house. And it's going to be slightly different in everybody's home. So if we think about just, cleaning up the kitchen, how many people would want to have a robot clean up their kitchen? Or clean up your room. Your mom is always telling you to clean up your room. Let's have a robot clean up your room. Well, how is that robot going to clean up your room? Because it's different. Exactly how you clean up your room is different than how your best friend cleans up her room or his room. So you need to be able to tell the robot at a high level, okay, this is my room, and here's where things go, and here's how you do it. And that's the problem that we're kind of working on. So what makes it hard is that it's different in every home and in every room, the task of cleaning up. You can describe it at a high level, but the exact details of what the robot needs to do, it changes depending on the person and depending on the place. And only the end user knows what they want. So me, as a designer of the robot, I can't tell the robot how to clean up your house. So only you can give that information to the robots. So that's the problem that I'm interested in. How are you going to be able to give that information that the robot's going to need to do everyday tasks in your world? So we call this socially guided machine learning. So we want the robot to be doing machine learning, but in a social way, with an end user that doesn't necessarily know about machine learning or robotics or anything like that. So that kind of sets up what we're working on, but today I want to talk about, just give a few examples of some of the things that we've been doing in my lab. And we've been structuring the problem is thinking like, well, how can we make the robot learn a little bit more like people do? So how can we make the robot into more of a social learner? And we can think about, today I want to talk about 3 different ways that people do social learning and how we can make robots more like that. So one thing that people do is we learn high-level goals. So the task of cleaning up the kitchen or putting away the dishes, I need to tell you a high-level goal of how to do that. Social learners are very transparent, and the process is also very reciprocal. So I'll get into what that actually means through some different examples. So first we're going to show some examples on the Honda Asimo robot that we did a few years ago, and then the other examples will be on our humanoid robot Simon that is here. And then I'll have time for questions at the end. All right, so let's talk about teaching the robot high-level task goals, like how to clean up your kitchen or how to set a table. So, so this is something that people do naturally, is divide up the world into objects and goals and very easily transfer something that, if you've taught me how to clean up the dishes at your house, if you all of a sudden changed your dishware, I would still know how to clean up the dishes at your house. So this is something that robots would have a very hard time with. If you changed anything about the task, it's a whole other task. So this is what we're interested in, is how do you get a robot to be able to represent a task in the same way that people do, and being able to represent the things that are important about that task. So we think about goals as having criteria and expectations. So for example, if I was trying to teach the robot how to recycle bottles, the criteria would be, what are the properties of objects that need to be recycled? And then the expectation would be, and where do the objects that need to be recycled go? And so you want the robot to build up a representation of what to do with these two constructs in mind. Okay, so I'll just show you really quickly how the robot is representing the world. So basically, it's representing the world by looking at the objects on the tabletop and making a list of everything that it can see or know about the objects that are on the tabletop. So it knows that this object right here is at a particular location on the table, has a particular color, and it has some size features. So that's how it sees the world, is through like different collections of features of objects. And if I look at, this is what the robot sees when it looks down at the tabletop, and then it uses some computer vision to calculate all of these different location, size, and color features. So let's see what it looks like when I try to teach the robot how to set the table.
I'm going to teach you how to set up the table.
All right.
You need to learn how to set up the plates.
Sure.
So you start the interaction and say, I'm going to teach you how to set up the table. And so that starts the robot off and saying, all right, now we're learning, let's do this thing. And then I will teach you how to set the table. Now that starts a subtask. It's like, okay, I'm learning this bigger thing that the person is calling set up the table. We're not doing any natural language understanding. It's just taking that whole thing and saying, okay, I'm just going to call this task set up the table. And then I can use that as a whole label with the person. So now I have a subtask called set up the plates. And so now we're ready to go. We're ready to learn this subtask.
Start like this. And like this.
Okay, so what the robot sees is a snapshot when you say start like this, and it saves that, and then you moved the plate and takes another snapshot at the end that says, okay, end like this. And so now the robot needs to reason about, what did you actually do, and what was the state change, and how can I represent that? So it takes that change and tries to build up a model. So again, you can't see this very well, but so over a few different examples, there would be a little bit of variance of where the plates might start off. You might grab it from the left of the cabinet versus the right of the cabinet, and you get a model of, where do the plates usually start off and where do they usually end up, and so.
Is there anything to set up?
Yes. You can set this object.
So now when you say, is there anything to set up, it's going to use that criteria model to say, well, this object over here matches all the other it matches the model of all the other objects that I've seen you set up the table with. So I'm going to say that this object over here something needs to happen with it.
How do you set up this object?
You need to put it over here.
So then to decide what you need to do with it, you look at the expectation model to say, okay, all the objects that when you set the table, what do you usually do with objects like this? You say, okay, well, it doesn't meet this expectation feature that I usually have, and what you need to do to fix that is change the location. So that's how the robot ends up building up a model over a few examples, and then using that model to do the tasks in a goal-oriented way. So here's a more complicated example on the Simon robot, where we can quickly go through and see some of the demonstrations. So here Simon's learning to set the table and then also clean up. So here's placing the bowl in the clean center of the table, putting a cup to the right of the bowl. And so for each of these, he's getting like 2 or 3 examples of each part. And then cleaning up, you put the bowl, you empty into the trash, and the cup you empty into the sink. So we see a few examples of each of those with different cups and different things in the cups. And then you put both the bowl and the cup into the sink. So with all of these little examples of things to do, then the robot's able to put it all together and set the table and clean up. Okay, so that was setting the table, and now it's going to clean up and empty the bowl into the trash. And the cup into the sink. Okay, so that's what we'd like it to be like when you bring your robot home from Best Buy. Is you just show it a few examples of how things happen in your house, and then it's able to do it. The next kind of example I want to give is around this notion of what we call transparency. So first I have to talk about what we mean by transparency. So in the examples I was giving before, the robot is really passive, and the person is just saying, okay, here's how you do things, here's how you do things, here's how you do things, and then the robot executes it. But that's not really how people learn. When somebody teaches you something, you're going to have questions, and you're going to give feedback to the teacher and tell them what you don't understand. So that's what we call transparency. So there's ways that you could just express confusion with your face, or a lot of times you just raise your hand and ask a question. So we're actually looking at the second way, and how would robots ask questions, or what kind of questions should robots ask when you're teaching them a task. So we actually implemented 3 different kinds of questions that a robot would ask when it's learning a physical skill. And I'm just going to show you the examples. But so here's an example of what the robot's learning. So here the teacher is giving a demonstration and posing the robot and saying, record frame. So it's recording an animation through physically moving the robot. So if you can't tell, it's just learning a kind of silly task of moving some coffee beans from one cup to the other. Okay, so the demonstrations come in this, go here, then here, then here, then here, and then the robot builds this is very late. So the robot builds a model of what the variance is that's allowed along that trajectory. So then I can create questions by perturbing this model and doing it again. And I'm just going to skip forward a little bit so that we can see how it looks like when Simon asks questions. So after seeing these 2 demonstrations from the teacher, the robot says, well, can I do it this way?
No, Simon, you cannot.
So that way it's a little bit more human-like. So it gets 2 demonstrations where it doesn't really know the task very well yet, and then just makes a guess at, okay, given what you've taught me, I think I could also do it like this, and I think I could maybe also do it like that, and sometimes that's going to be right, and sometimes that's going to be wrong. The other kind of questions he can ask So this one, the robot's going into a particular part of the skill, like the end of it, and saying, here is the important part. So remember, the way that the robot's representing things is like lists of features about an object, that it's turned this way and it's this color. So it's honing in on one of those features and saying, well, at the end, does this feature have to be that way? And it's showing you that through its physical embodiment. So we find that people are very much able to answer these questions, and it can speed up the robot's learning process quite dramatically. Okay, so the last example of human-like social learning that I want to show you is a little bit, it's about turn-taking. And so we're interested in the fact that in all of these interactions, and when you're trying to teach a robot or you're interacting with a robot, it's about the back and forth between a person and the robot. And people do this very easily. It's something that we do from a very early age. We share things, we talk, and we have really easy back and forth interactions. And so robots don't do this very well. And interactions that are robotic are often kind of stilted and they don't flow very well. So we're interested in building robots that can do turn-taking well. So first I'll show you some examples of robots not doing turn-taking well. This was from a study where we had people play the game Simon Says with Simon. How many people know the game Simon Says? Yeah, okay, so somebody's Simon, somebody's the follower, and you have to wait and not imitate until the person says Simon Says. So our robot can play Simon Says, and so we play this back and forth game. We look at what the interactions are like. And so here's an example of some of the ways that the robot gets fluent turn-taking wrong. So a lot of times, let's see.
Play air guitar.
Okay. Oh. Okay.
I win.
Good.
So he didn't do a very good job at Simon Says, and he played air guitar even though the robot didn't say Simon Says, and he realized, the person playing realized that he lost way before the robot ended its turn, but the robot kept going, and then a few seconds later says, I win. So that's not very smart. And the other way that the robot often gets it wrong is by just barging in and interrupting the person when they're trying to take a turn. So
Sure. Can it be my turn to play Simon?
Sure. Yes.
So what always happens when we bring people in and something like this happens, the person always backs off and says, okay, sure, yeah, you do whatever you were going to do. But we don't want robots to be that aggressive. We'd like robots to know a little bit more that they should relinquish the floor. They should let the person have their turn. So we built a controller that's able to do that by taking...
Simon says, wave around. Simon says, play air guitar. Simon says, wave to me.
So this time the robot is
Wave to me.
stopping the turn as soon as it realizes that the partner has taken their turn. So it's a much more fluent back and forth. And so we're not waiting for the robot to finish playing air guitar as long as it wants to. It's just going back and forth. And then the same with the speech. The robot will interrupt itself when it realizes the person wants to speak.
Hello. Let's play Simon Says. Can I play that? Sure.
So just the simple thing of interrupting yourself when somebody's speaking at the same time as you really changes the interaction. It makes the robot seem a lot more friendly, a lot more social, and a lot more willing to engage. And we think these kinds of things are going to be really, small things like this are going to be really important for the larger human-robot interaction goal. So we did an experiment and tried to prove that people liked this better, and they do. So I'll just show you some examples from this experiment. So in this experiment, people are playing this game called Towers of Hanoi, where you have to take this colored stack of cups, and they start off stacked up one way, and you have to move them around on the pegs until they're stacked up another way. And it's kind of a hard problem. And so people are solving the problem together with the robot. So the robot can move the cups around, or you can move the cups around, and you're trying to solve it together. And in one case, you can
Could you pick up the orange cup?
So in that case, the robot doesn't interrupt its actions. It's just going forward with whatever it wants to do. And in that condition, we saw a lot more people backing off from the robot, and kind of the robot was leading the show. But in the other condition,
Guys, having difficulty.
so it interrupted itself when it realized the person was already doing the thing it wanted it to do. And then it backs off and gets out of the way when the person's trying to do something. So it's doing a better job of letting the person do what they want to do and being a fluent partner. So here's an extreme example that came from this experiment that I kind of like. So this person wasn't really doing much teamwork. This person wanted to solve the problem themselves. So the robot is just waiting and waiting. And it thinks it might get a turn. Maybe, maybe no. So it's just patiently waiting to get a turn. And it backs off even further, because it's just looking for hands in the workspace. So anytime those hands left the workspace, it would jump in and take a turn. But that person is really busy getting their Towers of Hanoi done. But the problem is this person made a mistake, and they need an extra peg. And the robot's hand actually can be an extra peg. So once the person backs off and gets confused and is thinking about what to do next, that's when the robot jumps in and says, okay, it's finally my turn, and I can get this team back on the right track. And after that point, after the robot kind of saved the day in their Towers of Hanoi problem, the person actually let the robot take more turns and things. But what I like about this example is that this is really the kind of human-robot interaction that we're going for. So this person wanted to take a lot of initiative. They wanted to be the one in control, and it wasn't until they kind of backed off that the robot says, oh, I can do something here. So that's the kind of human-robot interaction that I think is what is going to fit kind of seamlessly into our lives. So that's what we call socially guided machine learning, just a few examples of the kinds of things we're doing. And I'm happy to take any questions that people have about Simon or any of the other robots. Why doesn't Simon have a mouth? That's a really good question. So originally we had thought that Simon should have a mouth and be able to do kind of emotional expressions. It creates a lot of complexity, and if you have so with any of the facial features, if you have them, you have to use them. And so if you have eyes, you have to know how to move them around. And we have actually a lot of control and intelligence that goes into thinking about how you should be moving the eyes around all the time. So same would go for the mouth. If you're going to have a mouth, you can't not control that correctly. So we're definitely interested in that problem, but I think that we're not at the point where we can build a really high fidelity expressions that are happening continuously all the time. Yes, right here in the front. These kinds of robots. So I've had my lab since 2007, and before we had Simon, when we were building Simon, we used these robots to kind of play around with some of the same ideas. But these robots are about this tall, and they have just a little webcam for a head. So we get to play around with some of the same ideas, but it's a lot simpler. They're called bioloid robots, which is kind of, yeah. Can Simon do stuff like play football and basketball? That's a really great question. So Simon doesn't have any legs. So Simon is only so it sits on a table, or actually sits on a steel post in front of a table, and does kind of tabletop activities. So we could try to get Simon to play basketball, and I would love to try that. That would be really fun. We haven't ever done it.